Hello everyone! So initially I was planning on having this video out in May rather than June. Then I thought it was going to be early June, and then I realized after a while it's already more than halfway through the month of June and I still have not posted this video yet. That was supposed to be out in May. But I had enough other things going on, including my surgery and just a bunch of other stuff, and I had to delay it quite a bit. It's also not going to be as in-depth as I was hoping, although I kinda knew that from the start. I've been busy enough with reviewing new albums that I just don't have the time to do as much proper in-depth analysis in my throwback reviews. But yeah, that's what we're doing today, another throwback review. And I've got another one planned for hopefully the end of this month, although I cannot promise any more throwback reviews in the near future, even if I probably should be able to put out quite a few more this year, hopefully at least 5 or 6. But anyway, for now I'm doing a throwback review of the classic 1979 album from the British rock band Supertramp, Breakfast in America, their 6th studio album, and probably their most famous and acclaimed as well. And I'm not sure that you could really say that they put out another super acclaimed album after this one. Although, maybe I'm wrong, I was not alive back then. Anyway, now for the usual explanation part of the video, where I explain why this is the album that I decided to review. Well, I initially wanted to pick something that would seem a little bit more random, or maybe a bit more obscure, but after a family member suggested that I review this, I thought that I should at least consider it. And because I'm trying to do approximately one throwback review per month, at least for this year, I was not really planning on reviewing whatever someone recommended to me. I was planning to just pick something myself. But then I realized that this seems like an album that could make for a good throwback review. Again, it's not going to be super in-depth, but it seemed like an interesting one to review, because it's another classic, but it's not a classic in the same tier as, say, Pet Sounds, which I talked about a few months ago. Like, it's not as much of a classic as an album like that. So I thought, fuck it, why not review Breakfast in America? And before I get into talking about the album itself, I just want to point out that this now makes the 1970s the first repeat decade in this series of throwback reviews. This is the 5th one that I've done so far, and with 2 from the 70s, I've also reviewed 1 from the 1960s, 1 from the 2000s, and 1 from earlier this decade. I still have not done 1 from the 1980s, 1990s, or 2010s yet, but I'll probably get to those soon. For now, let's talk about Supertramp, and honestly, this isn't really a band I'm super familiar with outside of this album. Yeah, I've obviously heard of them, and I know a few songs of theirs that aren't on this album, but they're not really a band I've spent that much time thinking about, nor do I think I don't think I've ever listened to another album of theirs other than this one. But I guess I should finally focus on the task at hand, so what are my thoughts on Breakfast in America by Supertramp? Well, it's an interesting one to discuss because there's a lot of things that this album does really well, where on paper it should be way more up my alley, and I still think the album's pretty good. But yeah, you guessed it, it's another classic album that's gotten a lot of critical acclaim and still gets talked about a lot to this day, and has undoubtedly gone down as a classic, and yet I don't think it's a particularly great album. It is good, just not great if you ask me. And I'll start by talking about the overall sound and style, and one big observation that another member of my family made, not the person who recommended I review this, is that this album has some strong carnival vibes, and I could not agree more. I mean, it's apparent right from the opening track, Gone Hollywood, with that piano loop that is suddenly changed to a lower octave when the guitar and drums kick in, and a similar vibe is very much present on the title track, maybe even more so. The subtle tension in the builds and falls of the instrumentations, with the horns and the almost marching band-like drums, although emphasis on almost. And there are similar vibes on some of these other songs, but the carnival vibes, while still there, are not nearly as blatant. So what kind of album is this, stylistically? Well, I guess you could call it pop rock, but it's very much of its time in that regard. In other words, not the same thing you'd think of when you think of pop rock nowadays. And I think they do a pretty good job at blending all of these instruments together into a larger experience where they're not afraid to experiment by expanding their instrumental palette. But that leads me to one of my main issues with this album, and it's absolutely worth acknowledging that there might be some context that I'm missing as someone who wasn't born until 25 years after this album came out. But in a lot of ways, to me, this just feels like a pretty typical late 70s, early 80s album. And it's not that there aren't good melodies here or anything, there absolutely are, nor do I have a problem with most of the performances, but it often feels like it lacks elements that really make it stand out, beyond just having a lot of impressive instrumentation or a cool collection of sounds. and I'm struggling to find a way to put this into words without just sounding like I'm being confusing or contradicting myself over and over again. I guess what I'm saying is, while I think they put all these sounds and ideas together to create some good quality music, they don't really do it in a way that makes it great, in large part because I don't think there's enough standout qualities to how they put this all together, even if I can respect the ambition. And that brings me to my next point, that I think there's a lot of good individual songs here. Unfortunately, there's also a lack of really excellent tracks, but I can still acknowledge the consistency of songs that are pretty good, or at least decent. There's probably not a song here that I'd call bad, although Oh Darling might be, considering its creepy, possessive lyrics. But back to my point of a lot of the songs being good, well, unfortunately, I just don't think they often flow into each other very well. And as a full project, the songs start to feel a little bit more dry when all bunched together into this 10-song experience. And it's kind of hard to explain why I don't think the album sequencing is that strong. I mean, it's not a huge problem, far from the biggest problem on this album, but it feels like the vibe is constantly switching, and not in a way that really makes a lot of sense. It's not like the songs all set up the sudden vibe change very well, and it leads to some awkward transitions. But again, that's a nitpick, and there are other larger issues with this album, such as the songs not really having a whole lot that stand out much, at least, or I shouldn't say all the songs, but a lot of them. And I guess one thing that also bothers me is that the vocals can be kind of obnoxious at points, or at least they're certainly not a strong point of the album. I generally like Roger Hodgson's vocals on this album more than Rick Davies' vocals here, as Hodgson can occasionally take command of a song, but Davies really doesn't fit on these songs in my opinion vocally, and sometimes it feels like he oversins a bit in ways that do not complement the songs, especially when he goes into his falsetto on Goodbye Stranger. Now, I feel like I'm probably making this sound more negative than it's intended to be, and I honestly don't have a ton to say about this album, so I guess to fill out the rest of this video's runtime and actually make as complete a review as I can, I guess I'll shift toward talking about the positives, of which there are quite a few. Now, do I think the melodies are the most amazing thing ever? No, but there are definitely some catchy, hooky moments that stick in your head, and it's usually not a bad thing. I mean, look at that piano loop that continues at the start of the opening track, which I mentioned earlier, or the subtly satisfying chord changes on the title track, or the melodic chorus of Lord Is It Mine. And I do think the production is mostly pretty solid, with the instruments blending together pretty well, including in a lot of the moments I mentioned earlier with the carnival vibes. And I'd also like to point out how well everything sounds together and like the longer outro of the closing track. And each instrument just plays its role on the songs in this album, and they don't really overpower everything else, but still add to the overall ensemble, like each individual instrument, and they all go together quite well. And I think it makes for a pretty easy album to enjoy, even if again I have issues with the final product that are mainly just that it isn't as interesting as I would have hoped. But I guess it is worth talking about the lyrics, at least a little bit, and, well, look, they're not bad except for the aforementioned Oh Darling, and I like some of the themes, but for the most part, there's not a lot here that's particularly mind-blowing for me. Although I do find Lord Is It Mine quite interesting in the way that the narrator seems to be seeking some kind of shelter, and feels like even once that shelter is found, like there's still some unease. And beyond that, I can usually just respect the intent with the themes they write about, such as Gone Hollywood being about the entertainment industry and how much it generally doesn't care about the people in it, at least I think that's what the song is about. Or there's also Casual Conversations, which shows the narrator struggling to fully connect with someone despite really wanting to. Again, these are good topics to write about, and I don't think they do a bad job, but it's nothing to really get all that hyped about. So yeah, don't take that as really a huge positive or a huge negative. It just kind of is what it is. Now, that said, I do really like a lot of the notable musical aspects, like the constant tension of Take the Long Way Home, and the really nice synths on the closing track, and a bunch of the things that I've already mentioned. So as a whole album, well, I know I did not really discuss this for as long as I wanted to, considering this is its own individual review. Yes, it's a throwback review, but if I really wanted to be more brief with my throwback reviews, I'd do throwback mini reviews. But as much as I wanted to have more to say about this, I also kind of feel like I'm just talking in circles, which is something I do fairly often, but especially here with this album. And thus, it leads me to end this review fairly early, with another large reason being that I have an insane amount of individual album reviews planned that I want to post pretty soon. I mean, at the end of the day, really the only difference between the individual album reviews and the mini reviews, it's mainly just that the individual reviews get their own video. Sometimes I feel like I don't even say as much in them as I do in some of my mini reviews. and it's a lot of just extra rambling about, hey, hi, welcome back to my channel, blah, 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 blah. But just quickly going back to the album, I do still like this album. You can probably tell exactly what rating I've been setting up this whole time if you know my rating system. It's about the most 7 out of 10 album you can imagine. It's good, not great, not essential listening by any means, and probably not something I would go out of my way to recommend, but still an enjoyable album that is far from bad and at least has some memorable moments, even if they probably won't end up in my regular rotation. I guess I would be curious to hear some of Supertramp's other albums, because I wonder if they were ever able to take the impressive elements of this album that really worked and put them to better use on a different album. I'd definitely be interested. So, of course, let me know if there's another Supertramp album that you think I'd like more than this one, and of course, feel free to let me know what you think of Breakfast in America, and also feel free to let me know what you thought of my review. I'm always curious to hear other people's opinions. And I think I'm probably just going to end the video here. I was thinking of giving a little bit more of an update on what I'm planning soon, but I'll probably talk about that in my next video, whenever that is. Yeah, that's basically all I got to say. I do have quite a few more videos planned, but I'll give more details soon. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you all soon.